and welcome to another week of Lost in Science. We're so happy that you could join us for 30 minutes of fascinating, fabulous, factual science. We love to get lost. We love to get lost in science. Here we are. My name's Lyndon, and joining me in the studio today is Stu. How are you, Stu?
I'm not too bad. I've been having a good week. It's been a bit muggy for me, but, other than that, pretty good.
Chris, what about you?
Look, I haven't been mugged yet, but, the mean streets of Brunswick, you never know what's going to happen.
So we've got Lyndon and Stu and Chris in the studio today. And boys, you have prepared some stories for us. Stu, I'll start with you. What are you bringing to the science table?
Look, my story is a convoluted tale of fashion and politics and astrophysics and inherent sexism, all sorts of fabulous things, all originating from a T-shirt, which made the news late last year. One of our politicians, the senior politician, wearing a T-shirt off a plane, made the news for a whole lot of reasons I'm not going to go into, but the T-shirt did get me thinking about other things, and that led me down a rabbit hole to find the origin of that T-shirt in question, which is really interesting. But, look, you're going to have to listen in to the show to find out the details of why that T-shirt's interesting, how it relates to science, how it relates back to Australia, why it's just such a roller coaster of a story. You have to just listen in.
Oh, my goodness. I'm intrigued.
Mystery T-shirt.
Pull that thread and it unravels.
Chris, can you beat?
I'm going to be a bit more specific with mine. I am talking about a story that was in the news fairly recently. There was a teenager in New South Wales who was ruled by the coroner that they had died from a allergy to mammalian meat, which is caused by bites from ticks. And yeah, I thought I would look into that and the groundbreaking Australian research that's gone into this whole thing.
Wow, sounds like we've got the full spectrum on the show today. Heavy and light. Let's get on with it.
I don't know if you remember last year, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, was the focus of a bit of attention for wearing what a lot of people might think is a relatively innocuous band T-shirt when he disembarked a plane towards the end of the year. It did make the news. There was a bit of political fracas, shall we say. So he was wearing a Joy Division T-shirt. Now, Joy Division was a band from Manchester in the UK. They formed in the late 70s. And despite having a name that was pulled from the history of Nazi Germany, they were never in any way promoting that political ideology, which was a bit of the political argy-bargy involved there. But the album cover that's on the front of that T-shirt that he was wearing is for an album called Unknown Pleasures, and it's probably one of the most famous album covers in UK music. Shows a very simple design of a series of, and try to describe an album cover in words. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, a series of cascading horizontal white lines on a black background. They sort of almost look like 2D mountains, if that makes sense.
So they come. I would talk them as some sort of like audio wave or that kind of thing.
As did I. I always thought, is this the opening bar to Love Will Tear Us Apart rendered in some sort of visual format? No, it's the simple answer.
In climate science, there is a type of data visualization that's called a joy plot, where you plot the distribution of temperatures each month of the year is a different horizontal line, and then you plot sort of how frequently different temperatures are, and then you see how those plots change over the year and over the decade. So you get 12 lines that change over time, like little wiggly worms. It's called a joy plot, based on that T-shirt as well.
How about
Maybe
that?
you were going to cover that already, Stu. That's what I thought it meant.
They named the plot after the design of the album cover. Is that
Yep.
right? Is that
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
that is not what it is
That
either.
is news to us, yeah.
So the design came from a graphic designer called Peter Saville, whose greatest input to the image was to present it in negative, white on black, because the original image was a printed image from a textbook, a black and white image from a textbook. Now, the textbook in question is called the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Astronomy, and the image itself was compiled by an astronomer for his PhD thesis in 1970, but it was pulled from someone else's work who came before him. So the image itself is like a truncated, stacked version of a single line of data from a radio telescope array reading, which is basically a static pen leaving a mark on a roll of paper based on signals from space coming through the radio telescope.
Hang on, so was the original one in lines like that and they just pushed them together? Is
The
that what you're saying?
original one was a single long line,
Okay.
and he's chopped it up and stacked it up, basically to get it into a diagram on a page in
Okay.
his thesis, which makes a lot of sense. So before, Harold Kraft was his name, he used it in his thesis in 1970. Another PhD student had recognised something strange in a readout which had never been observed before. And what that line is, what that signal is a signal from the first pulsar.
I was going to say, I mean, the only thing that's, if you're going to cut it up like a line that's got these pulses that you can line up next to each other, it's got to be something with a regular repeating radio pattern, which the first thing you think of is a pulsar, a rotating neutron star.
Well, it's the first thing you think of.
Okay.
Because you know what a pulsar is.
It's a Nissan.
Jocelyn Bell was a PhD student at Cambridge in the late 1960s, and she was helping to build a dipole array, which is a kind of radio telescope. I'm sure you're familiar with those, Chris. Basically a bunch of wires hanging off poles in a field, picking up radio waves from space. Now, she'd never seen anything like this, neither had anyone else, but nobody really knew that at the time. So she was testing this dipole array, and she was poring over reams of paper readouts, and you're talking hundreds and hundreds of meters of readouts, because the thing would just run all night as the array moved through space. It was picking up whatever it was pointing at. So she was poring over these reams of readouts, initially checking the array was working. So they'd just built this thing. They were going, does it do what we thought it would do? But what she noticed, what she called a bit of scruff on one of the readouts. And she sort of made a little squiggly note next to it. And then she kept poring over more readouts, and she noticed another one on another readout and realized it was representing the same tiny part of the sky with the same repeating signal that she'd seen before. So she went, that's interesting. She took it to her supervisor, who said, no, it's an error. Clearly it's an error. It's just something, you're picking up someone's arc welder from down the street, or whatever it might be. He insisted that they go and look at another array to check the results. So they stood there and looking at the array. He assumed she'd made a mistake in the construction of the array, because she was doing like soldering and banging in poles in the ground and all sorts of things. They went away to look at another array to check the reading. Didn't show up. So they were standing there, and she was feeling sheepish, and he was probably just about to tell her off. But 5 minutes after they expected it, bang, came. It arrived. 5 minutes late. They'd miscalculated the time that the other array would pick it up. So it did pick it up. Same signal, repeating every 1 1/3 seconds. In her little margin note, she first called it LGM1, which stood for Little Green Man.
Yeah, because they thought it could have been like signal from aliens or something, because that's the only thing they could think of, would that be a repeating signal like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And further examples were found from different parts of the sky. They recognized it as something else. But so a pulsar is a rapidly rotating neutron star, which you can kind of imagine is like a lighthouse with a light that rotates continuously, but as it sort of comes in our direction, we get a signal. So the extremely regular signal makes pulsars incredibly useful for astronomy, helps provide a benchmark to measure other things against because they're so regular and, repeating. They've been used to measure other things like gravitational waves. They've been used for testing Einstein's theory of general relativity. But prior to Jocelyn Bell, who was later Professor Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell, nobody had observed this. And even after she had, there was a huge amount of opposition, particularly from her PhD supervisor, which is kind of unfortunate when that's the person who should be really helping you out. Eventually, her results were published in Nature, and people recognized the breakthrough for what it actually was. But even though her supervisor had argued against her conclusions, he took the first author position in the paper, which look, that's often how it gets credited, and for a postgraduate student, then the professor's likely to take that. Or
I'm banging my head on the microphone.
Understandably, and because of the huge impact on astrophysics, the finding resulted in a Nobel Prize, or as one of her friends called it, a No-Bell Prize, because Jocelyn Bell was not awarded the Nobel Prize for her work. Her supervisor, Anthony Hewish, was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1974. This is still a controversial topic. People still argue that they made a really bad decision. Sure, it's unusual that a PhD student should get a Nobel Prize, but she did discover the thing and she argued for it. She presented all of the work or did all of the work to show that's what it was a pulsating neutron star. But she's apparently less upset by it than other people are. She got a huge number of awards for her work after this. She didn't get the Nobel Prize, but she did get a whole bunch of other prizes, which is fantastic, but it's still not the Nobel Prize.
I mean, but also, I can say also she is a lot better known now, and I never heard of him. So
yeah,
well, you'd have to look up who was the winner of 1974 Nobel Prize for Physics to know who he was. She went on to, she was the president of the Royal Society. She was, visiting professor, and she won huge awards. In 2018, she was awarded the Special Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics, which came with a £2.3 million prize, which is actually double what the Nobel Prize is, in 2018 for that work that she did back in the 60s.
Uh-oh.
So she did get recognised for it. She just didn't get the Nobel Prize. But she actually donated that £2.3 million to fund women and underrepresented ethnic minority and refugee students to become physics researchers. So she had a nudibranch species named after her in 2024, which is called Cadlina belburnale. And I mean, what greater honour than having a nudibranch named after you?
Well, maybe having
That's like a sea cucumber, isn't it?
a graph from your PhD thesis be used in someone else's PhD thesis that then gets switched colours and then gets put on a T-shirt and an
album. That's an equally great honour, I'll have to admit. But look, what does that have to do with Australia? Okay, well, everyone's favourite New South Wales regional radio telescope, the Parkes Radio Telescope. Surely that's everyone's favourite regional New South Wales radio telescope. But anyway, Parkes Radio Telescope has discovered more than half of all the known pulsars since Jocelyn Bell's discovery. And, I'm not sure if that's why our Prime Minister was wearing a Joy Division Unknown Pleasures T-shirt, but that's certainly recognition of the science that we would not necessarily have had without her initially under-recognised work, and I think that's definitely worth putting on a T-shirt.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
All right, so yes, you are listening to Lost in Science, and as I said in the introduction, there was a recent ruling in New South Wales that a 16-year-old had died from a meat allergy, specifically an anaphylactic reaction to mammalian meat that was triggered by a tick bite, essentially. He actually died in June 2022, but the analysis kind of finally was decided in February of 2026, and I think it's tragic, of course. This is the second person known to have died from this allergy in the world. So it's not a common thing. It is apparently being increasingly common, the actual allergies, but in terms of being fatal, this is, I think, the second documented fatality in the world. So there are, of course, now moves to widen awareness of the danger and for people to be, I guess, a bit more cautious of ticks. But there's also, I guess, a bit of a wondering of what's going on here.
So so there's been 2 recorded cases of this in the entire world.
2 recorded deaths, not recorded cases.
Are they the same tick? Like, How does it even? Is it? Are they both in Australia? Is it? How widespread is this issue?
This is a widespread issue, Stuart. I'm so glad you asked this particular question. It is a widespread issue, and it's a complicated one. It's not the only tick, the same tick everywhere in the world. It does happen in other countries with different ticks. However, it was identified separately in Australia and in the United States. Presumably from different species of ticks. I think the first ones that were, if you look back at all the records, the first ones that were documented was in the United States, and that would have been from a tick called, let me just find out what the tick is called. I think the Lone Star tick, which is Ablyoma americanum, is what you have in America. But in Australia, it is more commonly the Eastern paralysis tick, I believe it is called, which is Ioxodes holocyclus. Now, when I say it was first seen in the United States, that was really, I said, if you look at the records in the patient records, that sort of thing, the first publication of any work on the tick-induced allergy was done by an Australian immunologist, Cheryl Van Noonen. Basically documented this and has been a leading kind of advocate and proponent for awareness of this. The risk of this meat allergy. Her work was published in 2007, so it is a fairly recent discovery. And as you would imagine with any kind of recent discovery, incidence has been rising because it wasn't known before then. But it is believed that most of the rising incidence of it is due to more testing, more awareness, but it does also seem to be increasing as well, possibly due to more interaction with ticks, possibly due to changes to the habitat. We're not really sure.
So can you talk me through some of the specifics? Can you talk me through some of the specifics of how a tick bite can lead to a meat allergy? Is it all red meat that then becomes fatal potentially to a person? Is it where the tick bites? Is it how deep it goes? Is there some other conditions that a person might have that might make them more susceptible to develop the allergy?
Look, I think in terms of what causes the allergy, I think with any allergy, it's a bit of the roll of the dice, it seems. So this is like I said, this is the Eastern paralysis tick. I believe that it is thought that basically after 2 or more tick bites, about 50% of people, their bodies will start to make the antibody for this particular allergen, right? And it is due to an allergy to a particular chemical that's injected. It's a sugar molecule called galactose alpha-1,3 galactose, which is alpha-gal for short. So it's the alpha-gal allergy is what it is. So these ticks in Australia, these Australian ticks, they live off bandicoots normally, is their main kind of reservoir, but they will bite humans occasionally. But yeah, this sugar is in the saliva, and that gets into the body. Then you get your body produces, the immunoglobulin antibodies that respond to it. And so then the next time you consume something that has that particular alpha-gal in it, it could be meat, it could be, gelatin, it could be various other mammalian products, then you could get an allergic response. So yeah, that's the basics of it, really. This particular particular sugar, this alpha gal, is in essentially it's a carbohydrate that's found in the cell membranes of most mammals. I say most mammals because if you're like me, you're probably thinking, how can humans be allergic to mammalian meat? Because aren't we full of mammalian meat? This is my first question when I read about this. I thought, how could this possibly happen? Because surely we would not be allergic to it ourselves. It turns out, as I said, it is most mammals, but not a order, the catarrhines, which is the old world monkeys, which includes humans, right, which evolved in Africa. So a particular group of primates lost the ability to produce this particular sugar. And as a result, we now are prone to developing allergies to it if it is injected into our bloodstream by a tick.
Are there any cases that have been reported of monkeys having this allergy as well? Do you know?
No, I'm not aware of that.
I guess monkeys don't eat that much meat, do they?
Meat-eating monkeys
don't eat meat.
Yeah, I don't think they probably do. And it's so, as I said, it's seen in east coast of Australia. It is also seen in the United States, the Lone Star tick, which I would hazard a guess is probably around Texas, possibly. It's also seen in a different kind of tick in Sweden. So it's not necessarily in Africa where most of the monkeys are hanging out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's a very good question, though. I don't know if we want to do experiments on monkeys to find out if they're going to get
Happy
this or
to
not.
keep that in the unknown unknowns.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting thing, and I think it's particularly. I was trying to find out more about these paralysis ticks, like where they are, in particular, and particularly when they are. So they are kind of all down the east coast of Australia. They're sort of more prevalent, maybe around the middle parts, sort of southeast Queensland, that sort of area. Although the tick bite in question, I think, was from more the central coast of New South Wales that we're talking about. Has been detected as far south as Melbourne as well. But I suppose, it is kind of more, mostly the bite seems to be that they're more common in the summer, often when there's been a lot of rain, which I think we've had a wet summer in Queensland in particular. So perhaps something to watch out for in that particular circumstances. But there isn't actually a cure for it. So Cheryl Van Noonen has commented, she's kind of the leading expert on this, it seems to be, and as well as various other forms of allergies. She reckons that if you can avoid tick bites, then you can actually, the allergy will decline over time. So people can actually recover from it themselves if they avoid getting bitten by more ticks. Most of the response to it is just simply avoiding the bites. And in this case, that means things like, unfortunately for summer, wearing long sleeve shirts and long pants, tucking your shirt in, tucking your pants in, all those sort of things, basically avoiding the tick bites, wearing insect repellent with DEET, or other, similarly effective ones. It's avoiding the tick bites. If you do get bitten by a tick, you don't pull it off with tweezers. Because all you can do then is possibly squeeze more saliva into your bloodstream, which is the last thing you want in this particular case. There is this spray that you can buy at the chemist. Yes, it's an ether contained spray, also developed by Cheryl Van Noonen, it turns out. So I've a lot of respect to her. She's been working in this field for a very long time. I'm sure she's not just making this up so that she can sell ether sprays.
It's big DEET spray behind the whole story.
It's big.
It's a freeze spray, isn't it? Isn't it like a freezing spray that kills them and then you can take it off?
Yeah. Well, they call it freezing, and so it's got ether in it, which I believe, has kind of a freezing effect. Apparently the same spray, similar kind of spray can be used for like removing skin tags and that sort of thing. But yeah, you spray that on the tick. It kills the tick basically in situ, and then the tick should drop off, is the idea. If they don't drop off, then you're best to see a doctor to remove it carefully with special forceps. Again, even if a tick is dead, it could still squeeze some of the allergen into your bloodstream. So you want to try and avoid doing that. So yeah, the idea is to like I said, freeze it with your spray. It costs about $30 or less, I believe. Kind of if you're in a tick prone area, good to have part of your first aid kit probably, because it is the best way to avoid this. Otherwise, you could be on a forced vegetarian diet, which I've heard is good for the planet. So maybe it's not all bad. But yeah, it's a curious, I found this particularly interesting because it is a curious working of biology where it doesn't work the way you expect. And it just shows how kind of weird, I'm going to say wonderful, how weird the world can be when it works in the wrong way, really. Doesn't get my tick of approval, I'll just say that.
And that is all we have time for this week on Lost in Science. Thank you for joining us in Getting Lost. If you have any questions or suggestions for the team, get in touch with us by email. We are lostinsci@gmail.com. You can send cheap tweets to us at lostinscience1 on Twitter, or you can find us on the ubiquitous Facebook. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne on the land of the Kulin Nation and is broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find a podcast version of the show on 3cr.org.au, or you can tune in the way you did this week when we return in our usual time slot to get
Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.